I think, particularly with the pace of change as it happens today in the world and technology changing so fast, the media landscape changing so fast, I think we often find ourselves in situations, particularly in leadership, where people pretend they know everything. They know they're completely up to date with everything. Whereas I think in reality, there's so many things that we don't know or can't possibly know. So you need to have this curious mind. And sort of the point I was trying to make is, it takes a lot of courage to be dumb about something, to actually admit, what, I don't know about Oculus Rift, or I don't know about search engine optimization, or whatever it might be, and admit that and ask the questions. And then I think once you get to that mindset of constantly asking questions and with no fear of what you don't know, you learn so much more, and the world is so much more open, and everyone you meet you see as a potential opportunity to discover something new. So it's a great trait that I think people ignore a little bit. So I really try and encourage it as a value through our company, but in the wider world. People's lives definitely get improved when you find out what they don't know, or really genuinely how you can help them, how you can make a difference to their lives. And I think, I think even in terms of the way we work with our clients, I really encourage the agency to have that curious mind about our clients, and our clients know more than anyone about their business. But we have to ask, because they don't know what we don't know, and this is the same with the world. We don't know what we don't know, so we just have to ask questions. And I think there's so many things that we can change, improve, make better when we really understand the problem. So I think it starts with that, and then you can start going, oh, right, I have a solution to that. Like one of the things I showed was the mapping the favelas in Brazil, and the amazing thing is that when you think about, if someone in a favela needed an ambulance couldn't even find them because they weren't on the map. So knowing that, and then realizing that what you can do to change their lives, it starts with understanding the problem. So yeah, it's an amazing kind of trait to use. I mean, it has to be a conversation, and it's interesting. I sort of likened it to a first date. That's how brands need to behave with their customers. Like you're on a first date. Like you want to understand each other. You want to know about each other. They need to be as interested in us as consumers as we are in them as brands. So I think if you have that curiosity on both sides, where you are openly asking to find out more about people and what they need, what they want, what they hate, what they like, then I think that's when brands have real relationships with consumers. I think again, it's one of the campaigns I showed during my speech, but we were given a brief from Lux, our client, about fragrance, and it's interesting because fragrance is a very common thing that a lot of brands in beauty talk about. So we just started to think about fragrance from a different point of view, and sort of asking that questions like, what if fragrance was is it more important to certain people than others? And that sort of led us to that question of, what if you were blind? Like, what if you couldn't see anything else? Then fragrance becomes this incredibly important part of your senses. So that really led us to the project and we found a blind photographer, and what can he see in his mind's eye because of the fragrance. So it's sort of just the early questions really sort of unlocked something really, really interesting that we would never have got to that point if we hadn't sort of asked the questions and just been inquisitive about it at the very beginning. I'm very impressed by Turkish creativity. For me, it's interesting because you can tell by my accent I come from Australia, which is a smaller country as well, and I think we have about the same amount of people in both the countries, and I think that being a smaller market in the world scheme often gives you freedom to be more creative. And I think sometimes there's never enough money like there is in the United States. There's you don't have the big budgets of the UK, so you kind of have to be a little scrappy, and you have to sort of make your own luck and find ways of doing things that other people would be like, oh, that's too hard. And I think Turkish creativity has that sort of scrappiness to it. Like, people make things happen, and not necessarily with all the biggest budgets. And I find really interesting campaigns as a result come out of the country. So I think it's definitely a country that competes globally in creativity. I've been blown away by the festival. It's amazing because I'd heard of it, but I'd never, this is my first visit to Istanbul, so I'd never been here before. And I think seeing the amount of people here, it's I mean, it's so busy, but all the exhibitors, all the speakers, it's a really, really inspiring event, and you know, I can't encourage people enough to sort of spend time at these events. So I think it's fantastic. It's funny, I was very lucky. I was one of those people who actually knew I wanted to be in advertising from the time I was 13 years old. And strangely, I don't know if it's popular in this country, but I grew up with a show called Bewitched. And Darren Stevens was the character on Bewitched who was in advertising and used to come up with concepts for clients. And I always used to watch that as a kid and think, God, that looks so fun. Like, look what he gets to do every day and come up with these crazy ideas. And I think that was my first impression of advertising. And so I was very lucky that I went straight from school to university to study advertising, went straight into advertising. And always knew that I wanted to do it and have loved it every day since. You know, I've been doing it now for 25, 30 years, and I'm kind of lucky that I still love it as much as I did in those first days. So yeah, it's a blessing. The interesting thing for me is, you know, I think this is the best time to be in our industry and the best time for creativity, because I think the landscape is so broad and there's so many things that we can do that we couldn't have done before. You know, I mean, I've been lucky that, you know, in the last few years I've written a TV series that was, you know, on commercial television. 20 years ago, I'd never have had that opportunity because it, you know, that wasn't part of the media landscape in advertising. But now that's something that's open to us. You know, we get to invent products. We get so many more things that we're able to do because media is, you know, so fragmented, which, you know, some people say, oh, it's so difficult now because, you know, there's so many different ways to do it. But I look at it as like, it's so exciting because you can literally do anything, and being in advertising kind of gives you that permission to take a brand in any particular way. So, you know, I think it's changed a lot, but it's definitely for the better.